When you're a landscape photographer and you live in the city, you gotta find places to shoot. And actually, I'm right in the middle of the city. It's a little oasis just right in the middle of Fort Worth. And I thought I'd come down this morning and try to capture some of these elusive fall colors that happen in Texas, but nevertheless, they're here in Texas. You just gotta get out and find them. Anyway, the waterfall is pretty loud, a lot of water, a lot of flow of water. Hope you can hear me pretty well. But I think sometimes you just got to get your camera, you got to get out, you got to capture some images. And really, this is about a 30-minute drive from where I live, so it's not that far. And I was kind of being the holidays, I didn't want to venture out too far, but I would like to capture some fall colors. And I think that's what you have to do. You just have to make the best of what you have. And that's what I'm trying to do this morning. So I always like to check the hyperfocal distance. I'm actually a big fan of the hyperfocal distance. And I think, if for no other reason, then it just gives you an idea of where you're at in focus. And so basically I'm focusing on the rocks right there at the waterfall. And that makes sure that my main subject is in focus. Now, I'm not so worried about the water, but I am worried about the rocks that are exposed right in the foreground of the falls. But I want the trees sharp. And I want these stones right here in the foreground. I want those sharp too. So basically, I'm shooting at about 38 millimeters at f/13, and that gives me a hyperfocal distance of 12 feet. So basically, if I focus 12 feet, I get everything from half of that, which is 6 feet, to infinity in acceptably sharp focus. Now, we've talked about this acceptably sharp focus, but I always say an 8x10 picture hanging on the wall and you're standing at a normal distance and it looks sharp to you. So, but really and truly, I'm focusing at about 100, maybe 120 feet. And that gives me everything from 11 feet to infinity in acceptably sharp focus. So the reason that I focus where I am right now, which is really on my subject, is I want to make sure that it's more important for me, for my subject to be sharp than anything else. So I want those rocks in the foreground really sharp. And I think that's going to give me everything in the trees and everything sharp. Now, you know, when I'm shooting film, or when anyone shoots film, it's a guessing game. And that's the depth of field preview button was really handy when shooting film. It wasn't as good as it is now, let's face it. Digital has its advantages over film. And one of those is being able to use your LCD on the back of your camera and zoom in and really check that sharpness before you get back and develop your film and get everything back and find out that you missed focus. So, and you could stack here, really. I mean, if you really want to just make that sharpness just absolutely certain and pinpoint sharpness, you can focus on the immediate foreground, the midground, the background, or really and truly on this one. One's going to get it at f/13. And I'm not going to get any diffraction from f/13. I've checked this, f/11, f/8, f/13. Start to see a little diffraction, maybe f/16, certainly at f/22, but nothing I would worry about on this particular image. So at f/13, at 38 millimeters, that's going to give me everything I want, very sharp. So focus is important, super important. And if you don't know much about focus, I would highly recommend reading up on it. And getting in some type of app to find the hyperfocal distance. You know, you can go by the typical rule, which is shoot about 1/3 of the way into the frame, and you're going to get everything sharp. But that depends on the focal length that you're shooting at. So there's other variables that factor in on that too. That's why I always like to look at the hyperfocal distance and have an idea of where I'm at. On older lenses, you used to be able to do this on the lens. You can't do it with these modern lenses, but anyway, you got an app that's even better than trying to read the scale on a lens. So yeah. So anyway, let's see what else I can get into. These fall colors are actually a little bit better than I thought. You know, for those of us that live near cities or in cities and have the landscape photography bug like I do, you often find yourself having to drive out of the area to other places that are more aesthetically pleasing, I should say. But you know, there's nothing wrong with cityscapes and taking advantage of the landscape that you do have in a city. And there's areas like this that have great potential, that can be very beautiful. And at the right time of year, you can capture that beauty. So, you know, I always recommend that if you're in a city like this or a surrounding area, you know, take a chance and explore those areas that are close to you. You don't always have to get in your car and drive 200 or 300 miles to get to a beautiful location. They're out there, and I admit that in Fort Worth, I think they're there, but they're hard to find. But I think that's what makes us really good at our profession, is it challenges us to find these locations. So it makes you better at finding these areas where you can get out and photograph. And it makes you really look hard for the beauty, look hard at the detail. And I think that's important in landscape photography, because a lot of times, now I don't want to use a surgeon analogy, we're certainly not surgeons, but anyway, our scalpel is our camera. And the truth is that sometimes a long lens can really remove a lot of distractions and bring in and just into your frame that beautiful, or that composition, or whatever it is you're trying to capture. It can just eliminate all those distractions and really pinpoint that one area in an otherwise chaotic and just cluttered up scene. And I think that's what we do. We use our cameras as scalpels, but you can't do that if you're not trained to look hard and find the beauty. Find the beauty sometimes in otherwise areas that no one would say is beautiful. I mean, let's face it, Fort Worth is not known for its beautiful fall landscapes. So, as a landscape photographer, you got to find it. And sometimes maybe it's just a leaf laying on the ground. But they're out there, and that's what's important. Another tip I would share with you is, when you've got a composition set up like I do now, and you plan on coming back to it, it's best just leave your tripod where it's at. You take your camera off, just kind of canvas the area, and really and truly you should canvas the area, not on your tripod anyway. But this way, this will free you up to move around and check other compositions. But while I wait for the light to come in, leave my tripod set up. And I've got a little mark here, if you can see that little mark there on my L bracket. Another reason I'm a fan of L brackets. If you haven't seen my video on L brackets, you should take a look at it. I'll post a link to it in the description. But I like L brackets because you've got those marks that you can also line up on your tripod, and so you don't miss a beat. Your composition's set, you don't have to adjust anything, and you're ready when you come back to your original composition after I hopefully get that light. Well, I got a little bit of that warm light, that kind of glow on the background and the trees that I was looking for. I actually threw on a polarizer, a circular polarizer too, just to kind of cut some of the glare off of the rocks in the foreground. So I think that'll probably add to the image also. But and a few different compositions I toyed with, but I think the first composition is going to be the one. In fact, I've noticed that about myself. It's usually the first composition is the one I prefer, but I really won't know until I get back in post-processing and find out. Well, I guess that's it, but I'll leave you with this thought. If you're in the city, like I'd mentioned before, don't think you got to drive hours to get to a beautiful destination and take photographs. Just do a little searching, and I think we can find these hidden gems like this that not only are worth photographing, but are actually worth coming and spending a little time and enjoying some time outdoors. But anyway, I hope you liked the video, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And drop me a comment and let me know what you thought. And as always, if I don't see you down the road, maybe I'll see you on the trail.
Well, overall, I was pretty happy with this image. Although I think the fall colors could be better, but I have to remind myself I do live in the Fort Worth area. And although Fort Worth's not known for its vibrant fall colors, there's always a little hidden gem somewhere you can point your camera at and come away with a decent image. I thought I'd throw in a couple other images I captured in the Fort Worth area. I think they tell the story that Fort Worth is not void of fall, but that fall is here. And it just takes a little patience and a little open-mindedness to get out with your camera and look for the beauty, because it's here, even in Fort Worth.